Hello, Body Messiah. Today we're going to cover the last part of Lesson 11 in the WHI, where we're going to cover prophecies associated with Esau, who's also known as Edom, and his descendants, who are also known as the Edomite people. We're going to cover the prophecies, and we're going to go to an apocryphal book known as the Book of Jasher first to start, and we're going to cover all of the prophecies associated with him. Now, I want us to make sure that we don't go in with a mindset, once again, a European mindset of it's all or nothing. Like the prophecies that are made against Edom, the Edomite people, is for the entire, all of the descendants, just a blank prophecy against them. It's specifically a prophecy against those who choose to go a negative route, who are descendants of Edom, those who choose to hate their brother Israel, their descendants. And so those are the prophecies that are applicable to them. Because there are descendants of Esau who did choose to become a part of the household of Israel, or also chose to worship as a true Hebrew, as Father Abraham did. So there are descendants of Esau who did not go the negative route. Even though, yes, in the Bible there are some who did, including Herod, King Herod Sr. and Jr., who were the ones who tried to kill Yeshua. They were descendants of Edom. But I'll share with you some of the positive and some of the negative later. First off, we're going to go to the book of Jasher, chapter 8, and we're going to cover a prophecy that was given. Well, it was given specifically for Abram, right here. Abram, also known as Father Abraham. But the prophecy was given, the setting that we have in the book of Jasher, chapter 8, is Terah, Abram's father, is having a celebration for his firstborn son. Now, Terah was a part of Nimrod's court. During this time, Nimrod ruled over the world. He was the one who tried to orchestrate the building of the Tower of Babel, or Babel, as some people call it. And so Terah, yes, he used to be an idol worshiper. He was a part of Nimrod's courts of wise men, sorcerers, magicians, and all that. So as Terah is celebrating, his other co-workers, other wise men join him in the celebration. And after the celebration, those friends of his, those wise men, discover through the demonic powers of divination that a descendant of Terah, or Abram, is going to slay all of the kings of the earth and rule over it. Now, Terah's friends, or wise men, knew that this meant bad news for Nimrod, because at the time, Nimrod, he's the one who's ruling all over the earth right now. So they go and tell Nimrod and let him know about this particular prophecy. And Nimrod asked Terah to bring his toddler, his baby boy, so he can see him, and shower him with gifts. But Terah knew better. Unfortunately, Terah took one of his servants' newborn children, infant child, and took that child to Nimrod, and Nimrod killed that baby, thinking that he had killed Abram, or Father Abraham. Terah then took Abram and sent him to live under the household of Shem here and Noah. So for 40 years, Abram was raised under the household of Shem and Noah, and he was raised to be Hebrew, to believe in the one and only true Most High God. So after the 40-year period, he came back to his father's household, Terah's household. And you would think that'll be it. Terah is never going to turn Abram over to Nimrod for Nimrod to try and kill him. But that's not how the story ends. When you continue to read in the book of Jasher, you'll find that Terah gets angry at Abram because Abram destroys and demolishes all of Terah's idols, because he was trying to tell his dad and explain to him and show him and prove to him how these idols were worthless. They can't hear, see, breathe, talk, or do anything. So when Abram destroyed his father Terah's idols, he got angry and said, okay, I'm going to turn you over to Nimrod. And he did. He turned Abram over to Nimrod and his other son, Haran. Nimrod took Abram and Haran. Nimrod took them and threw them into a fiery furnace, similar to like what Nebuchadnezzar did to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Unfortunately, Haran died. He was burnt alive. Abram, for 3 days, he walked around and was unscathed, unharmed by any of the fire. Nimrod sent some men in to get him, and they were burnt alive. So on the third day, Nimrod solicited Abraham and asked him to come out, and Abram came out. Everybody in Nimrod's court and all the people marveled and realized that God was with Father Abraham. And Nimrod showered him with some gifts, and the people who used to serve Nimrod began to serve Abram. And so Nimrod had the fear of the Most High God in him because he knew it was just a witness that Abram was shielded and protected by the Most High God. Even his father, Abram's father, Terah, changed his ways of idol worship and began to adhere to what his son was saying. So what does that have to do with Esau or the Edomite? If you go and turn to the book of Jasher, chapter 27, we'll see. So you remember I was telling you guys from Genesis 25 where it talks about the birth of Jacob, Esau and Jacob under Isaac and Rebekah, and how, the story unfolds. They were twins. One brother was Harry, the other one was not. And the backstory of Esau going to hunt, and he came back from the hunt and he gave his birthright, sold it to Jacob. The backstory is in the book of Jasher, chapter 27. When you look in the book of Jasher, chapter 27, we see where Nimrod is going to hunt, and he's taking a couple of mighty men with him. And he had other mighty men that were coming to follow along later. Nimrod always kept a watchful eye over the descendants of Abram. And one in particular he kept his eye on and probably was going to try and take out was Esau, because he knew Esau was a mighty warrior and a mighty hunter. So they kept an eye on each other. Esau kept an eye on Nimrod, and Nimrod kept an eye on Esau. And I'm pretty sure if they had a chance, they would take one another out. And that's what happened. Nimrod went off to himself, separate from the two mighty men that were with him. And Esau, they were not aware that Esau was also out in the fields or what have you, woods hunting. And Esau snuck up on Nimrod, and he killed Nimrod, chopped his head off. And so Esau took off because he just knew the mighty men of Nimrod and of his court were going to come hunt him down and kill him. This is the backstory of how Esau came along from hunting and was exhausted and sold his birthright to his brother Jacob. I personally believe he was in fear, and he thought for sure that Nimrod's men would come and kill him because they knew he had killed Nimrod. And when he came along and sold his birthright to his brother, it is my belief, it's not stated in the book of Joshua or the Bible, that Esau had some slick intentions himself. I believe he was going to point the finger at Jacob and say, he's the one who did it. He's the oldest. He has the birthright. But what happened is no one came along looking for Esau to hunt him down or knew it was him who killed Nimrod. And Esau did fulfill the prophecy of the kings being slain, king of the earth, well, Nimrod being one of the kings to be slain. I believe many other people wanted to kill Nimrod, but they were just fearful, and they wanted to do the same thing Esau did, but never could find a moment. Because what happens next in Nimrod's kingdom is it was split amongst five rulers, mostly who came from Canaan, the Canaanite clan. So that's what happened in that prophecy. Esau ended up fulfilling that prophecy. Now, we're going to move on to talking about some of the prophecies against Edom, or the Edomite people. Now, we know the backstory that Esau held a grudge against Jacob because he felt the deceptive way that Jacob deceived his father into getting blessed with the birthright was not right, and he wanted to kill his brother. It says that in Genesis chapter 27, verse 41. So Esau was holding on to that bitterness and that bitter root. And these negative prophecies I'm about to share with you against the household of the Edomite people go hand in hand with them carrying that bitter spirit or that bitter root against the descendants of Jacob or Israel. You see, Esau probably would have had a longer life if he had not, after Jacob, he kept his promise before Jacob died and never searched to hunt him and kill him, especially after the three angels, as I mentioned in the last lesson, visited Esau and put the fear of the Most High God in him. He received his brother, forgave his brother, hugged his brother and everything. But after his brother Jacob died, you'll see in the book of Jasher, chapter 56, he tried to open up old wounds and tried to cause conflict amongst his nephews, Jacob's son, to try and prevent them from burying their father. He lied and said that Jacob didn't rightfully purchase the land that he wanted to be buried in and didn't own it, which he knew he did, beyond a shadow of a doubt. And at that moment, he sealed his fate because God allowed a deaf and mute member of the household of Israel to come and kill Esau. His life was shortened. So this bitter spirit and bitter root, I'm certain, was carried down to some of his descendants. Not all, but some. And I'm about to share that with you. Okay. As you can see, I have to adjust the camera so that we can get the rest of the chart here. And you can see where we're going to focus on Esau and his descendants. And the negative prophecies or the judgments against the Edomite people are going to come from, they're going to come from Amos chapter 1, Obadiah chapter 1, Ezekiel chapter 35, Jeremiah chapter 49. We're also going to look at a verse in Psalms chapter 137 and verse 7. So as I said before, in these judgments, God is telling the Edomite people why they're going to be judged. And here are the reasons that he's giving. Now, as I said, there was a negative bitter root that Esau carried against Esau. And you can see in some of the book of Jasher, if you choose to read it, where Esau once tried to get Eliphaz to kill Jacob, which didn't work because Jacob gave Eliphaz some gifts and he didn't. But you'll see Amalek here. And if you look in, I'm just going to mention quickly, Exodus chapter 17, you'll see where the Amalek is the father of the Amalekites. And they did some treacherous, hateful things towards the descendants of Israel. For instance, when the Israelites came out of Egypt and God had brought them out of the slavery of Egypt, they wanted to pass through in Amalekite territory. And so the descendants of Israel asked them, Moshe asked the king of the Amalekites, could we pass through basically as a shorter route to get to their destination? The Amalekites said, no, you will not pass through our land. We will not allow you to do that. And so the Israelites adhered to the answer that they gave, and they began to travel the longer route around the Amalekite territory. But the Amalekites did something treacherous. They came up with their army and attacked the Israelites from behind. And once they did that, as you read in Exodus chapter 17, Moshe had to hold up the staff so that the Israelites could prevail over the Amalekite, and they defeated them. But there's always this antagonistic relationship between the Amalekites trying to attack or harm Israel, and Israel having to defeat them. When you look in Deuteronomy chapter 5, God told the Israelites, never forget what the Amalekites did to you and how they treated you, because they treated you treacherously. They didn't greet you with bread and water. The Israelites promised they wouldn't even touch a vineyard or a well water passing through their territory. but the Amalekites were being hateful. And so God said, I want the memory of the Amalekites blotted out forever. That's what he says in Deuteronomy chapter 25. It urges the Israelites to remember how badly they mistreated the Israelites. So this is one group of people who are descendants of Edom who held on to some bitterness. I'm pretty sure they were holding on to the bitterness of how Esau was murdered or was killed during trying to prevent Jacob from being buried or what have you. So, and being that he was a descendant of Eliphaz, that bitter root carried on. Now, when we look in Amos chapter 1, God is telling the descendants of Edom the reason why he's judging them. He said to them, because you pursued your brother with the sword. He says that you stifled your compassion. You held back your compassion for your brother. He said that you held on to continual wrath. When we look at Obadiah chapter 1, he said that you rejoice in as the Israelites are being carried off into captivity to the Babylonians. You were happy and rejoiced over it. He says when you look in Ezekiel chapter 35, he says to them, you were happy, when Israel was destroyed and you pursued them with a sword to let them be carried off into bloodshed, into captivity. When you look at Psalms chapter 137, verse 7, he said, you rejoiced when Jerusalem was being burned down to a crisp. You were happy that this happened. And this torment came upon the descendants of Israel, the judgment that happened against them. And God said to them, because you rejoice in the bloodshed, he says in Ezekiel chapter 35, then I'm going to allow bloodshed to overtake you. He also made a promise to them that people you thought, the Edomites thought were their allies, are going to turn against and harm them. He says this in Obadiah chapter 1 and verse 7. He says that in Jeremiah chapter 49. The people you think are your allies are going to come against you and destroy you. They're going to set fire to Mount Seir and Basra. They're going to leave these Edomite cities desolate and uninhabited. And this is what happened. When we look at how the prophecies were fulfilled, they were fulfilled against the Edomite people because they held on to that bitterness against their brother. Now, here are the scriptures in which these prophecies, these judgments against Edom were fulfilled. Now, we can look in 2 Samuel chapter 8, verse 14, 1 Chronicles chapter 18, verse 13. And in that, it describes how King David defeated tribes of Edomite people. He defeated them there. You can go to also 2 Chronicles chapter 25, verse 14, and you will see where a king named Amaziah defeated the Edomite people. And then a prophecy that was fulfilled where it says the people you think are your allies are going to come against you and destroy you. Look in 2 Chronicles chapter 20, verse 23. And there you have the Edomite people fighting with the Ammonites and Moabites. And then all of a sudden, the Ammonites and Moabites turn against the Edomite people. And they attack the Edomite people and destroy them. Set fire to some of their cities and things like that. So outside of biblical historical information, when it says that earlier when I told you about the prophecies, that was in Ezekiel 35, Jeremiah 49, Obadiah chapter 1, God specifically told them that was going to happen. People you think are your allies who fight alongside you are going to turn against you and destroy you. Now, I want you to go to look up a historical reference, because also in the 6th century, there were a group of Arabian people or tribes that came against Mount Seir and the Edomite people. During that time, the Greeks called the Edomite people Idumea, Idumea, I believe. I might be spelling it wrong, so you may have to check on the spelling for me. But they call the Edomite people Idumea. And so what happened is this group of Arab people called the Nabateans Nabatean, defeated the Edomite people there, destroyed the city, Mount Seir, and ran all the Edomite people off. And it has not been inhabited since, and that was in the 6th century. So what God said is true, and he fulfilled his judgment against the Edomite people for those who were bitter against the descendants of Israel. And like I said, there are some who chose to do good and did not go that route, who are descendants of the Edomites. For instance, you see how I have the name Reuel underlined here. Reuel, remember we discussed this name before. Reuel, this namesake is carried down, and we see it again probably about 430 to 500 years later, after the children of Israel are brought out of Egypt, and Moshe's father-in-law is also named Jethro, is also named Reuel. He was a Midianite priest, okay? So he's Hebrew, but he also may have been related to the Edomite people based on the namesakes. These namesakes are carried down over and over again. So as we see here, the Midianite people who were associated with Jethro, Moshe's father-in-law, who's also known as Reuel, 430 years to 500 years later, also went off and joined with the descendants of Israel. Moshe asked them to join them and come with them, and some of them did. So we see a namesake here that's underlined. You see how I have it underlined twice? It's Korah. Now, Korah is a descendant that is also, this namesake is found under the descendants of Levi, the tribe of Levi. And we know in Numbers chapter 16 is where there was the rebellion of Korah, where this Levitical leader tried to turn the other Levitical leaders against Moshe and Aaron. And what God did is he took the Korah's household. Korah is the name of that Levitical leader who tried to lead the rebellion. Him and about 4 or 5 other leaders. And he had them stand outside their tent of their home with their family, and the earth opened up and swallowed them. This is in Numbers chapter 16. God also sent down fire, and other people who had rebelled against Moshe and Aaron, about 250 men with incense were burnt alive, okay? So you would think, oh, that's the end. That's that rebellious spirit from Edom. They're not redeemable. But if you go on and look in 2 Chronicles chapter 20, verse 19, you see where the Korahites, the descendants of Korah, other descendants, under the Levitical priesthood, are worshiping the Most High with the king of Judah, in Israel. They're worshiping the Most High, and they're counted amongst them. So it's not an all or nothing picture here. You have some bad, some good, some that choose to do right and some that don't. And like I mentioned before, okay, we have Reuel. I want to mention the scripture that came from Reuel's name, that is Jethro, is in Exodus chapter 3 and verse 18. And you'll remember that the advice that Jethro gave, which was in Exodus chapter 18. So I wanted to just give the scriptural reference here so y'all can know and look for yourself and see. Now there's good and bad amongst them all. And like I said before, we have Herod, King Herod, who was also a descendant of Edom and Israel. And he was an evil leader, because we know that he, the King Herod that tried to kill Yeshua at his birth before he was born. And then there was the son who also wanted and saw Yeshua and thought not much of him. But if he felt like he was something that was a threat, he wanted to kill him. But you have that negative, bitter spirit still going down through in generations and generation, even to Yeshua's time. So the moral of the story that I feel we can glean from Esau and the Edomite people is that we all have a choice to worship the Most High in Ruach and in truth, and to abide by his word, to try not to cause discourse among the brethren, to try and live in peace and love one another, because this is what God wants us to do. Vengeance is his and judgment is his. And he's going to carry it out and it's going to be fulfilled. But we have to choose right. We have to choose it out of unity of one particular purpose. And that is to worship the Most High in Ruach and in truth, wholeheartedly. And that's what our goal has to be. Well, Body of Messiah, I thank you so much for joining me in this lesson. This is lesson 11. We're going to move on to lesson 12, where we're going to dig deeper into the whole house of Israel, where we talk about the descendants of Israel and how the word proves who they are. That the majority of the household of Israel, as I've said over and over again, are descendants of Africans and African slaves. And I'm going to address that. It may be lesson 12, part 1, 2, and 3, as this had many parts. But I'm going to drive deep into that message so we'll understand. Because I don't want anyone to be unawares and not knowing. I want us all to worship in Ruach and in truth, and we have to accept that truth. Well, thank you so much, Body of Messiah, for joining me. I hope you're able to join me for many, many more. Until next time, may Adonai Elohim cover you with his shalom peace. Goodbye.